Prime Minister of Canada Mark Carney. His political career and achievements. Everything about the Prime Minister of Canada Mark Carney, his life, and everything about him. Part 2. Before the 2016 Brexit referendum, Carney warned that leaving the European Union could cause a recession. After the resignation of Prime Minister David Cameron, he made another public announcement shortly after the result supporting a departure. He announced that the financial system would operate normally to assuage public concerns. Afterwards, the bank cut interest rates in half, from 0.5% to 0.25%, and restarted quantitative easing. At the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in the United Kingdom, as Carney was set to leave the governorship in March 2020, the bank cut interest rates by 0.5% to protect against the pandemic's expected economic shocks. In 2020, Carney served as one of many informal advisors to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, advising him on the government's COVID-19 economic response. Carney reportedly advised Trudeau on Canada's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, with Trudeau looking to Carney to help Canada get out of its recession. Due to this, Carney was speculated to potentially become Minister of Finance, and later, Canadian Prime Minister, if Trudeau resigned. In October 2020, Carney was vice chairman at Brookfield Asset Management BAM, where he led the firm's environmental, social and governance (ESG) and impact fund investment strategy. In February 2021, Carney retracted an earlier claim that the $600 billion United States Brookfield Asset Management portfolio was carbon neutral. He had based his claim on the fact that Brookfield has a large renewable energy portfolio and all the avoided emissions that come with that. The claim was criticized as accounting tricks, because avoided emissions do not counteract the emissions from investments in coal and other fossil fuels responsible for Brookfield's carbon footprint of about 5,200 metric tons of carbon dioxide. In January 2020, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson appointed Carney to the position of finance advisor for the UK presidency of the COP26 United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow. At that time, the conference was scheduled for November 2020. But it was later postponed to November 2021. In 2021, Carney spoke at the Liberal Party Policy Convention, declaring his support of the party, but stopping short of pledging to run under its banner. Later that year, he ruled himself out as a candidate in the then-speculated 2021 Canadian federal election, owing to his COP26 commitments. Carney endorsed Catherine McKenny's candidacy for mayor of Ottawa in the 2022 mayoral election. In October 2023, he endorsed the UK Labour Party's Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves to be the next Chancellor of the Exchequer in a video following Reeves' speech at the Labour Party conference that year. Following Labour's victory in the 2024 election, Carney was part of a task force which saw the creation of a British National Wealth Fund. On September 9, 2024, Carney was named by Justin Trudeau to chair the Liberal Party of Canada's Leaders' Task Force on Economic Growth. His name was briefly mentioned upon the resignation of Chrystia Freeland as a possible candidate for finance minister in Trudeau's ministry. On January 16, 2025, Carney officially announced that he was running in the 2025 Liberal Party of Canada leadership election. Carney also announced that he stepped down from all executive, board and advisory positions that he was part of in order to focus on his leadership campaign. By February 9, his campaign had raised more than $1.9 million in donations from over 11,000 people and received endorsements from 66 Liberal caucus members. Carney won on the first ballot with over 85.9% of the vote, making him the leader of the Liberal Party. In 2020, Carney launched the Task Force on Scaling Voluntary Carbon Markets, an initiative to increase trading of voluntary carbon offsets with Bill Winters as Group Chief Executive. The TSVCM is sponsored by the Institute of International Finance. Task Force members include more than 40 leaders from 6 continents with backgrounds across the carbon market value chain, including representatives from the Bank of America, BlackRock, Bloomberg's New Energy Finance, BNP Paribas, IBAS, BP, Boeing, Goldman Sachs, Tata Steel, Total, IHS Markit, and LSE. In a December 3, 2020 Financial Times article, Carney said that the voluntary global carbon offset market was an imperative to help reduce emissions. The Times article cited Carney saying London would likely host a new pilot market for voluntary carbon offsets that could be set up by December 2021. In September 2024, Carney became a special advisor and chair of the Liberal Task Force on Economic Growth. Shortly after the appointment, it was revealed Brookfield Asset Management had solicited the federal government for $10 billion Canadian dollars in funds as part of $50 billion Canada-only asset fund. Carney did not need to follow standard ethical disclosures mandatory for prime ministerial advisors because he was employed by the Liberal Party rather than the Prime Minister's office. According to Carney, in 2012, Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper asked Carney, who was then Governor of the Bank of Canada, if he would join the Conservative government as Minister of Finance. Carney declined, stating in a February 2025 interview with the CBC that he felt it wasn't appropriate for him to proceed with the offer because he felt it was not right to go directly from being governor into elective politics. Carney was approached by the Liberal Party to run for leader in their 2013 leadership election. He ultimately declined to do so. As he prepared to step down as Governor of the Bank of England, Carney was appointed as United Nations Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance in March 2020. In January 2020, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson appointed Carney to the position of Finance Advisor for the UK presidency of the COP26 United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow. At that time, the conference was scheduled for November 2020, but it was later postponed to November 2021. In 2021, Carney spoke at the Liberal Party Policy Convention, declaring his support of the party, but stopping short of pledging to run under its banner. Later that year, he ruled himself out as a candidate in the then-speculated 2021 Canadian federal election, owing to his COP26 commitments. Carney endorsed Catherine McKenny's candidacy for Mayor of Ottawa in the 2022 mayoral election. In October 2023, he endorsed the UK Labour Party's Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves to be the next Chancellor of the Exchequer in a video following Reeves' speech at the Labour Party conference that year. Following Labour's victory in the 2024 election, Carney was part of a task force which saw the creation of a British National Wealth Fund. On September 9, 2024, Carney was named by Justin Trudeau to chair the Liberal Party of Canada's Leaders' Task Force on Economic Growth. His name was briefly mentioned upon the resignation of Chrystia Freeland as a possible candidate for Finance Minister in Trudeau's ministry. On January 16, 2025, Carney officially announced that he was running in the 2025 Liberal Party of Canada leadership election. Carney also announced that he stepped down from all executive, board, and advisory positions that he was part of in order to focus on his leadership campaign. By February 9th, his campaign had raised more than $1.9 million in donations from over 11,000 people and received endorsements from 66 Liberal caucus members. Carney won on the first ballot with over 85.9% of the vote, making him the leader of the Liberal Party. His margin of victory surpassed Justin Trudeau's 2013 margin, winning all 343 electoral districts. On March 14, 2025, 5 days after winning the leadership election, Carney was sworn in as the 24th Prime Minister of Canada, along with the 30th Canadian Ministry. Upon taking the oath of office, he became the first Canadian Prime Minister born in any of its territories as opposed to provinces, and the third born west of Ontario after Joe Clark and Kim Campbell. He is the second Prime Minister to have earned a PhD. Additionally, he is the first to have never served in prior elected office, and the first since John Turner not to be sitting in the House of Commons at time of appointment. In his first act as Prime Minister, Carney signed a prime ministerial directive to end the consumer carbon tax by April 1st, while ensuring that April's carbon rebate continues. The directive was affirmed by an order in council signed by Governor-General Mary Simon. Carney's first foreign visits were to France and the United Kingdom on March 17 to strengthen mutual security and sovereignty. During the latter visit, Carney met with King Charles III for the first time as Prime Minister. Carney was widely expected to call a federal parliamentary election for late April or early May 2025, ahead of the required election date in October. On March 22, the Liberal Party announced that Carney would contest the South Ottawa riding of Nepean in the election ridings in Alberta had been floated, given his personal connection to the province, particularly Edmonton, as were safe Liberal seats in Toronto and Ottawa. On March 23, Carney visited Governor-General Mary Simon and asked to dissolve Parliament and call an election for April 28. Carney and the Liberal Party subsequently won the election, winning 169 seats and falling 3 seats short of a majority. Carney also won the Nepean riding, making him the first prime minister since John A. Macdonald in the 1880s to represent a riding in the Ottawa area. To open the 45th Canadian Parliament, Prime Minister Mark Carney invited Charles III to deliver the speech from the throne, an act described as a symbolic affirmation of Canada's sovereignty. Among the items outlined in the speech was the government's intention to join Rearm Europe, a European-led defense initiative. Carney has been described as moderate, centrist, and technocratic, and ideologically characterized as a member of the Blue Grits faction of the Liberal Party of Canada, being economically liberal, also known as fiscally conservative and social. Carney was noted for using masters of our own house, in French, maître chez nous, a phrase associated with the Quiet Revolution. In 2011, Carney referred to the Occupy Wall Street protests as entirely constructive, citing frustrations being felt particularly in the United States over inequality and increasing CEO-worker pay gaps. In December 2016, Carney warned of the societal risk of staggering wealth inequalities in a Roscoe lecture at Liverpool John Moores University. The proportion of the wealth held by the richest 1% of Americans increased from 25% in 1990 to 40% in 2012. Globally, the share of wealth held by the richest 1% in the world rose from 1/3 in 2000 to 1/2 in 2010. On August 23, 2019, Carney delivered a speech at the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City's 2019 annual Jackson Hole Economic Symposium, entitled The Growing Challenges for Monetary Policy in the Current International Monetary and Financial System. Carney said that the widespread use of the US dollar, the dominant currency pricing, in trade invoicing, in place of the currency of either the producer or the importer, has had a destabilizing effect on the global economy. About 50% of international trade relies on the US dollar as the currency of choice. This represents 5 times greater than the US's share in world goods imports and 3 times its share in world exports. Dominant currency pricing is not problematic when there is synchronized growth globally, Carney said. When the tide is rising in America while receding elsewhere, the system needs to be revamped. Carney cited an article by Marcus Brunermeyer, Harold James, and Jean-Pierre Landau on the potential role of digital currency area, DCA, in redefining the international monetary system. Speaking just hours after U.S. President Donald Trump posted a tweet blaming Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell's policies for creating fears of an economic recession and threatening China with more retaliatory tariffs, Carney urged central banks to collaborate in replacing the US dollar as reserve currency. He cautioned against choosing another new hegemonic reserve currency, like the renminbi, and suggested instead a new synthetic hegemonic currency SHC, such as Libra, which could potentially be provided through a network of central bank digital currencies that would decrease the US dollar's domineering influence on trade worldwide. I stop at this point today. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep exploring the world's incredible stories. Soon we will publish Part 3. Thank you for watching.